14 people died in buildings my daughter built. My wife and son were the last two. When Evelyn exiled me to a crumbling cabin with a forged will and a fake Alzheimer's diagnosis, she thought she was sending me to disappear. She did not know Helen had spent 2 years turning that ruin into a loaded gun aimed straight at her throat. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment I stood between two graves and watched my daughter smile. November in Chicago is not cold. It is punishment. The wind off Lake Michigan cuts through wool and skin and bone until you feel hollow. And on that particular morning, standing in Oakwood Cemetery with 300 mourners pressed around me like a black tide, I had never felt more hollow in my life. 2 mahogany caskets sat side by side above freshly dug earth. Helen in the first. My wife of 36 years, the woman who could read a contract faster than any attorney I ever met and still cry at dog food commercials. She was 61 when the scaffolding collapsed. Daniel in the second. My youngest, 27 years old, just passed his architecture licensing exam, just started talking about proposing to his girlfriend. He was working beneath the scaffolding when it came down. They told me he covered his mother with his body, that she died anyway. I want you to understand what it feels like to stand at a double funeral where 300 people will not meet your eyes, where the whispers follow you like smoke, where the priest talks about beloved members of this community, while every soul in attendance believes you are the reason they are dead. Not because I killed them, because my daughter told them I was losing my mind. Have you ever been erased while still breathing? That is what Evelyn did to me. In the weeks between the accident and the funeral. She called my colleagues. She called our neighbors. She called Helen's friends, my friends, people who had known me for decades. And she told them the same story each time. Daddy is sick. Early onset Alzheimer's. He has been hiding it for years. Mother was trying to protect him. The stress of caring for him is what put her at that construction site that day. She was checking on the project because Daddy could not be trusted to do it anymore. 300 people looked at me and saw a disease. They saw a burden that had killed his wife through negligence. They saw a man who should not be here, should not be standing unsupervised, should not be trusted with his own grief. I gripped my father's pocket watch in my coat pocket. The brass was warm from my hand. It was the only thing keeping me tethered to the earth. The priest finished his hollow words. The mechanical lowering system hummed to life, and both caskets began their slow descent. I watched Helen disappear into the ground. I watched Daniel follow her. My wife, my boy, gone into the frozen clay of Chicago, while 300 people blamed me for being alive. That is when I saw it. Evelyn stood directly across the graves from me, 39 years old. Tall and angular in a black Valentino dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her dark hair pulled back severely. Her makeup flawless. Not a single tear track visible. And as the caskets vanished into the earth, as the sound of machinery filled the silence where grief should have been, my daughter's lips curved upward. Just slightly. Just for a moment. A smile. My daughter was smiling at her mother's grave. I am an architect. I have spent 40 years reading structures, understanding how buildings hold together, identifying the invisible forces that keep walls standing or bring them crashing down. And in that moment, looking at my daughter's face across my wife's open grave, I saw a structure I had never noticed before. Something load-bearing had shifted in Evelyn years ago, and I had been too blind to see it. The smile vanished as quickly as it appeared. Evelyn composed her face into appropriate grief and began walking toward me. Her heels clicked against the cemetery's stone pathway, each step measured, each step deliberate. The mourners parted for her, the way people part for someone they fear more than they respect. She reached me and placed her hand on my arm. Her fingers were cold, even through my coat sleeve. Dad. Her voice carried manufactured concern, pitched perfectly for the surrounding audience. We need to talk about the will. Gerald Morrison is waiting. Today. I stared at her. Today? We just buried them, Evelyn. The dirt is not even settled, which is exactly why we cannot delay. Her grip tightened on my arm. There are financial matters. The company. Your condition. She said that last word louder than necessary, letting it carry to nearby ears. We need to handle this while you are having a good day. A good day. As if I were a patient. As if this were a hospital and she were my keeper. I searched her face for any trace of the girl I raised. The child who begged me to build her a treehouse. The teenager who asked me to teach her how to read blueprints. The young woman who cried at her own wedding because she said no man would ever love her like her daddy did. I found nothing. Just architecture. A perfectly constructed facade with nothing human behind it. Raymond appeared at her shoulder. My son-in-law of 14 years. 45 years old, soft in the middle, wearing a suit that fit poorly, and an expression that fit worse. He would not meet my eyes. He had not met them since the hospital. Since he stood in the hallway while Evelyn told the doctors about my condition and I was too grief-stricken to fight back. Come on, Dad. Evelyn guided me toward the parking lot. Her hand on my arm felt like a shackle. Gerald is waiting. Let us get this over with so you can rest. Rest. As if I were tired. As if the problem were fatigue and not the fact that my daughter was steering me towards something I could not yet see but could feel in my bones. The way you feel a building about to fail. The subtle groan of steel under too much weight. The hairline crack that precedes collapse. Something was about to collapse. And Evelyn was holding the demolition switch. 1 hour after I watched my wife and son disappear into the earth, I sat in the offices of Morrison and Park on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in the Chicago Loop. The city sprawled below us, gray and indifferent. Up here, the air smelled of leather chairs and expensive lies. Gerald Morrison sat behind his mahogany desk. 64 years old, silver hair combed with surgical precision. The kind of man who had delivered terrible news so many times it no longer cost him anything. He opened a manila folder with practiced solemnity and would not look at me directly. That should have been my first warning. Lawyers who avoid your eyes are lawyers who know what is coming. Evelyn sat across from me, legs crossed, hands folded. The posture of a woman waiting for a meeting she had already won. Raymond stood behind her chair, his thick fingers gripping the leather back, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere above my head. Let me tell you something about reading a room. 40 years of architecture taught me that every space tells you something before a single word is spoken. The arrangement of furniture, the distance between chairs, the angle of light. This room told me I was not a participant. I was a subject. The chairs were positioned so that Evelyn and Morrison faced me together, a unified front. My chair sat slightly lower, an old negotiation trick. I was being managed. Morrison began reading. It is my final wish that the following provisions be honored without contest. My daughter Evelyn and her husband Raymond have demonstrated the judgment and stability needed to preserve our family's legacy. I entrust Bishop and Associates, all associated properties, and the family residence to their care. I gripped the armrests. These were not Helen's words. Helen spoke in blueprints and poetry. She never used words like provisions or entrust in conversation. This was legal language written by someone who thought in contracts, not a woman who thought in architecture. Then Morrison produced a USB drive. Small, black, unremarkable. He plugged it into a laptop and turned the screen to face me. Mrs. Bishop recorded this herself, he said. She wanted her voice to deliver certain provisions directly. He pressed play. And my dead wife's voice filled the room. Walter has been declining for several years. I have tried to protect him, to hide the extent of his condition from our colleagues and friends. But I can no longer pretend. The episodes are worsening. He forgets conversations. He loses hours. Last month, he could not remember Daniel's name. I stopped breathing. That was Helen's voice, clear and unmistakable. The slight rasp she developed after her bout with pneumonia 5 years ago. The cadence I had fallen asleep to for 36 years. But the words were impossible. I have never forgotten my son's name. I have never lost a single hour. My mind is the one thing that has never failed me. I am leaving the company and our home to Evelyn, because she is the only one capable of protecting what we built. Walter's condition makes him vulnerable to exploitation. This is not punishment. This is protection. To my husband, I leave the property on Lake Michigan. It is my hope that the quiet will bring him peace, that he will find rest there, away from the pressures that have worsened his decline. The recording ended. Silence pressed against my ears like deep water. This is a lie. I managed. My voice sounded foreign to me, thin and old in that expensive room. Helen would never say these things. I do not have Alzheimer's. I have never had a single symptom. Morrison shuffled his papers. Evelyn's expression did not change. Dad. Her voice was patient, rehearsed. We have documentation. Dr. Reinhardt at Northwestern. You have been seeing him for 18 months. The records are quite thorough. I have never seen a Dr. Reinhardt in my life. Evelyn opened a leather portfolio and slid a stack of papers across the polished table. Medical records, visit summaries, cognitive test results, prescription history, my name on every page, my signature on intake forms I had never signed, 18 months of appointments I had never attended, documenting a disease I did not have. Do you understand what it feels like to see your own destruction documented in triplicate? To hold papers that prove you are losing your mind when you know, with absolute certainty, that you are not? It is like standing in a building you designed yourself, and being told it does not exist. The foundation is beneath your feet. The walls are around you. But everyone in the room insists you are standing in an empty field. I looked at Gerald Morrison, hoping for something. A question. A flicker of doubt. He straightened his papers and cleared his throat. The documentation is quite comprehensive, Mr. Bishop. Mrs. Bishop was clearly concerned for some time. He had chosen his side. Or perhaps Evelyn had chosen it for him long before this meeting. Evelyn leaned forward. Her pale blue eyes held nothing I recognized. There is one more thing, Dad. You have 48 hours to vacate the family home. Pack what you need. We will handle everything else. Your company access has already been revoked as of this morning. For your own protection, my company, Bishop and Associates. 40 years. 200 buildings across North America. 112 employees who depended on me. And my daughter had locked me out before the funeral flowers wilted. She slid another document across the table. A release form. Waiver of rights. Agreement not to contest. Sign this, and everything stays private. Your dignity remains intact. People will remember you as a great architect who retired gracefully. She paused, letting the alternative hang unspoken. And if I do not sign? Evelyn's smile was small and cold. Then we pursue a formal competency hearing. Public record. Every colleague, every client, every student you ever mentored will read about your decline in the Tribune. Your legacy becomes a cautionary tale. A brilliant mind, destroyed by disease. She tilted her head. Is that what you want people to remember? Or would you rather go quietly, with grace? I looked at the pen she had placed before me. Silver. Expensive. The kind Helen would have chosen for signing important contracts. Even the pen was a weapon, designed to feel familiar, designed to make surrender feel like choice. Have you ever signed your own death certificate? That is what those papers felt like beneath my hand. Each page stripped away another piece of who I was. Architect, husband, father, company founder. By the time I set down the pen, Walter Bishop had ceased to exist on paper. In his place stood a 63-year-old man with a manufactured disease and a one-way ticket to nowhere. Evelyn collected the signed documents with the efficiency of someone closing a real estate deal. Then she slid a single piece of paper across the table. An address written in Helen's handwriting. 847 Lakeshore Road, Harborfield, Michigan. Mother's little joke. Evelyn's voice held something that might have been amusement. Your one failed legacy, Dad. The project you never finished. She said Helen insisted you have it. Personally, I would have let it rot. I stared at that address. Helen's handwriting. The familiar loops I had seen on grocery lists and love notes for 36 years. But this address meant nothing to me. I had never designed a cabin on Lake Michigan. I had never heard of Harborfield. In 36 years of marriage, Helen had never mentioned this place. Not once. So why was her handwriting sending me there? 48 hours. That is how long my daughter gave me to erase 63 years of existence. To walk through the home where I had raised her, where I had built a marriage, where I had watched my children take their first steps on hardwood floors I installed myself, and decide which pieces of a lifetime could fit in a single suitcase. I drove back to Lincoln Park in silence. The November streets were wet with the kind of gray drizzle that makes Chicago feel like it is morning even when it is not. The brownstone on Fullerton Avenue looked the same as it always had. Red brick, black iron railing. The front garden Helen had planted with lavender that was now dead from the frost. 36 years in this house. I designed the renovation myself in 1984, back when Daniel was not yet born, and Evelyn still ran to the door when she heard my car. I parked in the driveway and sat for a long time with the engine running. The heat blew against my face while November pressed against the windows, and I could not make myself open the door, because once I walked in there, once I started putting my life into boxes, it was real. The funeral was grief. The lawyer's office was shock. But packing a suitcase, that was surrender. I went inside. The house smelled like Helen. Even now, a month after the accident, her scent lingered in the curtains, the pillows, the wool coat still hanging by the front door. I stood in the hallway and breathed her in, and told myself I would not cry. Not here. Not where Evelyn's surveillance might be watching. Because I had no doubt she was watching. A woman who forges medical records and fabricates video confessions does not leave loose ends unsupervised. I moved through the rooms like a ghost in my own home. The living room where Daniel learned to walk. The kitchen where Helen and I slow danced to Frank Sinatra while dinner burned. The study where I drew my first major commission on a drafting table that still sat by the window. 40 years of architecture started in that room. Every building I ever designed was born on that table. I could not take the table. I could not take the house. I could not take the life that had happened inside these walls. What do you pack when you are packing for exile? I chose my father's pocket watch, already in my coat. A change of clothes. My reading glasses. A photograph of Helen and Daniel from last Christmas, the last one we took together. Daniel had his arm around his mother, both of them laughing at something I said. I do not remember what was funny. I would give anything to remember. I stood in Daniel's old bedroom. His architecture books still lined the shelves. His first blueprint, framed on the wall. A treehouse he designed at 12 years old, using a code system we invented together. Our secret language. Grid lines and hidden dimensions that meant nothing to anyone else. I almost took the framed blueprint, but something stopped me. A feeling I could not name. A whisper from somewhere deep that said, "Leave it. You will not need it. You will have something better." I do not know why I listened, but I left it on the wall. By evening, I had one suitcase. One bag. The pocket watch. $800 in cash from the kitchen drawer Helen kept for emergencies. And a printout of an address I had never seen before. 847 Lakeshore Road, Harborfield, Michigan. I loaded the car at 11 that night. The street was empty. Not one neighbor came to say goodbye. Not one light flickered in acknowledgement. In 36 years, I had shoveled their sidewalks, attended their children's graduations, designed a community center pro bono for the neighborhood association. None of it mattered. Evelyn's story had reached them all. Poor Walter. Such a brilliant man. What a tragedy. I pulled out of the driveway and did not look in the rearview mirror. I could not. Interstate 94 east, toward Michigan. The highway stretched before me, black and wet. Headlights reflecting off pavement that looked like oil. I drove at exactly the speed limit. Hands at 10 and 2. The way Helen always teased me about. "You drive like an architect," she used to say. Precise and boring. I would give anything to hear her say it one more time. An hour into the drive, I turned on the radio. I needed noise. I needed something other than my own thoughts, which circled like vultures over the wreckage of my life. Static, country music, a late-night talk show about conspiracy theories, then a news broadcast from WGN, and I heard my own name spoken by a stranger. Bishop and Associates announced today that founder and principal architect Walter Bishop has taken early retirement, effective immediately. Company CEO Evelyn Bishop Cross cited her father's declining health following recent family tragedies. The firm, known for landmark designs including the Chicago Millennium Cultural Center and the Detroit Riverfront development, will continue operations under Miss Bishop Cross's leadership. I pulled onto the shoulder and sat in the dark with the engine idling and my hands shaking on the wheel. Effective immediately. She had done it before I even signed the papers. The announcement was prepared, the press release written, the narrative constructed days or weeks before that meeting in Morrison's office. Everything I experienced today, the Dichuk, the video, the ultimatum, it was theater. A performance staged for an audience of one, designed to make me comply with something that had already happened. Evelyn did not just steal my company. She erased me from it, retroactively, as if I had never built it at all. I sat on that highway shoulder for 20 minutes. Cars passed in bright streaks, each one carrying someone with a life intact, someone whose daughter had not hollowed them out from the inside. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47. In another life, I would be in bed beside Helen, listening to her breathe, complaining about her cold feet against my legs. I pulled back onto the highway and kept driving, because there was nothing behind me anymore. And somewhere ahead, on the shore of a lake my wife had never mentioned, a cabin was waiting. That was the thing I could not stop turning over in my mind. The address. Helen's handwriting on that paper was unmistakable. I knew her loops, her flourishes, the way she crossed her T's with a slight upward slant. She wrote that address. She intended for me to have it. But in 36 years of marriage, Helen never mentioned a cabin in Michigan, never showed me photographs, never suggested we visit. Not once in thousands of conversations, thousands of shared meals, thousands of nights lying beside each other in the dark trading secrets and dreams. I knew her parents lived in downstate Illinois. I knew her childhood memories centered on summers in Springfield and winters in the city. There was no cabin. There was no harbor field. So why, in her final act, had my wife sent me to a place that did not exist in any memory we shared? Daniel's last text message pulsed in my mind. 3 weeks old. Unread until the hospital called. Dad, check the Kowalski project files. Something is wrong with the materials orders. Call me when you can. I never called. The scaffold collapsed 6 hours later. The highway was empty now. Just me and the road and the flat darkness of northern Illinois giving way to the gentle roll of Michigan farmland. Whatever waited at 847 Lakeshore Road, Helen had put it there for me. She had written that address knowing I would eventually hold it in my hands, knowing I would have nothing else left. My wife had hidden something on the shore of Lake Michigan, and for the first time since the funeral, the grief in my chest made room for something else. Curiosity, sharp and dangerous as a blade. I arrived at 847 Lakeshore Road as the last light bled from the November sky. 4 hours through flat Illinois farmland and rolling Michigan countryside, watching the landscape shift from urban gray to rural brown to the deep blue-black of a great lake stretching toward a horizon I could not see. And then, at the end of a gravel road that had not been maintained in years, I found what my wife had left me. The cabin looked like something the lake was slowly digesting. I sat in the car for a long time, engine ticking as it cooled, and stared at what Evelyn had called my failed legacy. Siding pulling away from the frame in long curls like dead skin. A roof that sagged in the middle as if exhausted from holding itself together. Windows clouded with grime, one cracked in a spider web pattern. The front porch tilted at an angle that, as an architect, made my spine itch. Paint that might have once been blue now, a weathered gray. The color of things forgotten. This was my inheritance. This was where my daughter had sent me to disappear. I stepped out of the car, and Lake Michigan hit me. Not the wind, the presence. Even in darkness, you feel a great lake. The weight of it, the sound, a low, constant breathing that makes the air feel alive and ancient. The temperature had dropped to near freezing, and my breath came in white plumes as I walked toward the porch. The front steps groaned beneath my weight. Every instinct I had developed in 40 years of structural engineering screamed at me. This building was not safe. This building was failing. The header above the front door showed visible rot. The porch joists flexed when I shifted my weight. If I had been inspecting this structure for a client, I would have condemned it. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. And then I stopped breathing. Have you ever walked into a space that contradicted everything your eyes told you from outside? That is what happened when I crossed the threshold of that cabin. From the exterior, this building was dying. From the interior, it was a masterpiece. The walls were not rotting. They were double insulated, wrapped in vapor barrier, finished with hand-planed cedar that glowed honey gold in the beam of my phone's flashlight. The floor, which should have been warped and water-damaged, given the exterior's condition, was level, perfectly level. I could feel it in my feet the way only an architect can, the absence of any slope or give, the solid confidence of a properly engineered subfloor. I ran my hand along the wall. Behind the cedar, I felt the faint hum of an electrical system. Active. I found a switch by instinct, flipped it, and warm LED light filled the space. Solar-powered. I could see the control panel mounted near the kitchen entry, green indicators glowing, battery at 87%. Running water. I turned the kitchen faucet, and it flowed clear after a moment's hesitation. Filtered. A well system, with an electric pump, maintained and functional. I moved through the cabin room by room, my architect's eye cataloging what I was seeing with growing disbelief. Double-pane windows behind the grimy exteriors. A heating system, radiant floor, efficient and silent. Structural reinforcements hidden inside walls that appeared to be failing. A roof that sagged on the outside but, from the attic access panel, revealed itself to be perfectly trussed and waterproofed. Someone had spent a great deal of money making this cabin look like a ruin while building it into a fortress. Let me tell you what this meant to me. As a layman, you might see a nice renovation. As an architect, I saw a love letter. This was not general contracting. This was not a handyman fixing up a lakeside property. This was architecture. Deliberate, thoughtful, precise architecture designed by someone who understood not just buildings but the specific man who would walk through that door. The cedar walls were the same species I used in my first major commission. The floor plan echoed the proportions I taught in my graduate seminars. The sight lines from every window framed the lake the way I frame landscapes in my designs. Using the golden ratio, Helen always said I was obsessed with. Helen built this. Not with her own hands, but with her mind. She hired someone, gave them specifications only she could know, and created a space that spoke my language. Architecture, the language we shared for 36 years. The one thing Evelyn could never take from me because she never learned to speak it. My wife was talking to me from beyond the grave, and she was saying, "This is not a punishment. This is a gift. Look closer." I looked closer. The main room was roughly 400 square feet. Kitchen, living area, a hallway leading to a bedroom and bathroom. Simple. Efficient. But my eyes kept returning to one spot on the floor. Near the kitchen island, where the cedar planks met in a pattern that should have been random but was not. 3 boards, slightly lighter than the others, arranged in a configuration I recognized. A datum point. In architecture, it is a reference marker, a fixed point from which all other measurements are taken. Helen had placed one in the floor of this cabin. She was telling me, "Start here." I knelt and ran my fingers along the seams of those 3 boards. They were not nailed. They were set in place with precision-cut joinery, held by friction alone. I pried them up with my car key, and beneath the floorboards, set into a concrete subfloor, was a steel safe. Small, maybe 18 inches square, matte black, built flush with the concrete so that with the boards replaced, you would never know it existed. A digital keypad glowed faintly green in the cavity, waiting for input. 4 digits. I stared at that keypad and felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Helen had built this. Helen had hidden this. Whatever was inside that safe. She had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that only one person would ever find it. 4 digits. A date. And I knew immediately which date she had chosen. Not our anniversary, not my birthday, not hers. The one date that connected me to this cabin with absolute certainty. The one code that no one else would think to try, because no one else would understand why it mattered here, in this place, in this context. March 15th. Daniel's birthday. My dead son's birthday was the key to whatever my dead wife had hidden beneath this floor. And as my trembling finger hovered over the first digit, I understood something that made the hair on my arms stand straight. Helen had planned this. Not weeks ago. Not months ago. Years. She had built this cabin, hidden this safe, chosen this code, all while cooking family dinners and attending board meetings and kissing me goodnight. She had been preparing for this moment while I remained blind to everything happening inside my own family. What did you know, Helen? How long did you carry this alone? The keypad blinked. Waiting. Patient. The way Helen always waited when she knew I needed time to catch up. I pressed 3. 1, 5. Enter. The lock clicked open, and the green light turned to white. The safe opened with a soft hiss, like a sealed tomb exhaling for the first time in years. Inside, arranged with the precision I recognized as Helen's particular brand of obsessive organization, sat 4 manila folders and a cardboard tube, the kind architects use to carry rolled blueprints. I knelt on the cedar floor and stared into that steel cavity the way a man stares into a well, knowing there is water at the bottom but not knowing how deep it goes. My hands trembled as I lifted the first folder. Helen had labeled each one in her precise script. Folder 1. Financial evidence. Folder 2. The dead. Folder 3. Daniel. Folder 4. For Walter when you are ready. The cardboard tube bore a single word. Project 14. I opened financial evidence first because Helen placed it first, and I had learned across 36 years that my wife never did anything without a reason. If she wanted me to see the money before the bodies, there was a logic to it I would understand later. 87 documents. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Shell company registrations in Delaware and Nevada. Corporate filings, spanning 7 years. And on every single document, on every authorization, on every fraudulent invoice, a signature I recognized the way I recognize my own heartbeat. Evelyn Bishop Cross. Let me tell you what $72 million looks like when it is stolen from your own family's company. It looks like invoices for structural steel that was never delivered. It looks like payments to subcontractors that do not exist. It looks like material orders doubled on paper but halved in reality. It looks like a daughter sitting at your Thanksgiving table, kissing your cheek at Christmas, holding your hand at your birthday dinner, while systematically draining everything you built over 40 years through a network of phantom vendors and shell corporations. 7 years. Evelyn had been stealing since the year we promoted her to CEO. Since the year we trusted her with the thing we loved most after our children. Since the year Helen said to me, "She is ready, Walter. Our girl is ready." I turned pages with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. The numbers climbed. 3 million the first year. Cautious. Testing. 5 million the second. 8 by the third. By year 5, Evelyn was siphoning 12 million annually, her technique refined into something almost elegant. Shell companies nested inside shell companies. Invoices from suppliers with real-sounding names and fake addresses. Wire transfers routed through 3 jurisdictions before landing in accounts that bore names I had never seen. My daughter was not just a thief. She was a prodigy of theft, and she had built her criminal architecture with the same precision I had taught her to build real ones. I closed the first folder and felt something inside me shift. Not break, shift. The way a building shifts when you remove a load-bearing wall. Everything above it must find a new way to stand or it comes down entirely. I reached for the second folder. The dead. Do you know what it costs to save $12 million a year on construction materials? I am about to tell you. It costs lives. 14 pages. Each one a single sheet. Each sheet containing a name, a date, a project, a cause of death. 14 construction workers who went to job sites my daughter managed and never came home. 14 men and women who died because the steel in their buildings was substandard, the concrete was undermixed, the safety equipment was counterfeit, the scaffolding was rated for half the weight it carried. I read their names aloud in that quiet cabin, giving each one a voice they no longer had. James Kowalski, age 44. Fell from scaffolding at the Riverside Complex, April 2013. Scaffold rated for 800 pounds. Loaded to 1,500. Material substitution authorization signed by E. Bishop Cross. Maria Santos, age 31. Crushed by concrete panel failure at the Lakeside Towers, September 2014. Panel mix specification reduced from grade 40 to grade 25. Cost savings memo signed by E. Bishop Cross. I read all 14 names. Each one a knife. Each one a family destroyed. Fathers who never came home for dinner. Mothers whose children grew up with photographs instead of hugs. Workers who trusted that the buildings they built would not kill them. And my daughter signed every single order that guaranteed they would die. 14 people. 14 funerals I never knew about. 14 graves dug, because Evelyn decided that human lives were an acceptable cost of doing business. That steel could be thinner, if no one was checking. That concrete could be weaker, if no one was testing. That scaffolding could be cheaper, if no one was counting the weight. I thought of James Kowalski, the same last name as the project Daniel mentioned in his final text. Dad, check the Kowalski project files. Something is wrong with the materials orders. Daniel found it. My son found the bodies. I opened the third folder with hands that shook so badly I nearly tore the cover. Daniel. One word in Helen's handwriting, and it contained the end of my world. A maintenance report for scaffolding at the Meridian Tower project. Daniel's last worksite. The building where my son and wife died on October 15th. Cause of structural failure was listed as material fatigue and unexpected load stress. An accident. Tragic, but explainable. But clipped to that official report was a second document. An internal procurement order dated 3 weeks before the collapse. Authorization to substitute grade 40 structural scaffold connectors with grade 20 units at the Meridian Tower project. Cost savings of $14,000. The order bore one signature, Evelyn Bishop Cross. She had not just cut corners on the building where her brother worked. She had specifically ordered the substitution of safety-rated scaffold components with units rated for half the required load. 3 weeks before Daniel climbed that scaffold. 3 weeks before Helen stood beneath it to check on the project her husband was supposedly too incompetent to oversee. My daughter did not just let Daniel and Helen die. She engineered their deaths the way I engineer buildings. With precision. With calculation. With full knowledge of exactly which structural element would fail, and when, and how catastrophically. 14 workers were collateral damage. Acceptable losses in a 7-year embezzlement scheme. But Daniel and Helen were targeted. Intentional. Deliberate. My son discovered the pattern. My wife confirmed it. And Evelyn killed them both, using the same method she had used 14 times before, hiding murder inside architecture, making intentional destruction look like accidental failure. I sat on that cedar floor surrounded by $72 million of fraud and 14 death certificates and the procurement order that murdered my family, and I felt something I had never felt before. Not grief. I knew grief. Grief was the cemetery. Grief was the empty side of the bed. This was different. This was rage. Cold and architectural. Load-bearing. The kind of rage that does not scream or shatter things. The kind that draws blueprints, There was still a fourth folder. Still the cardboard tube. Helen was not done speaking. She had shown me the money. She had shown me the dead. She had shown me who killed our son. Now she wanted to show me the plan. The fourth folder waited on the floor beside me. Helen's handwriting on the label. For Walter, when you are ready to understand everything. I was not ready. But I opened it anyway. My dearest Walter. Helen's handwriting filled the first page, and time stopped. The wind outside the cabin ceased. The lake went silent. Even my heartbeat seemed to pause, holding space for my dead wife's voice to reach me through ink and paper. 4 pages. Cream-colored stationery. The kind she used for important letters. The paper was soft at the edges, worn from handling. She had held these pages many times before sealing them inside that safe. My dearest Walter, if you are reading this, everything I feared has come to pass. I am gone, and probably Daniel too, and you are alone in the cabin I built for you. I am sorry I could not tell you. I am sorry I carried this alone. But you must understand why. 22 months ago, during a routine audit of our Southeast Division, I discovered a discrepancy in the materials budget. What should have been a clerical error turned into something else when I followed the numbers. They led me to Evelyn. Helen described the discovery precisely. Without drama. She found the first shell company by accident. A vendor name she did not recognize on a 7-figure invoice. She pulled the thread, and the entire tapestry unraveled. Shell companies in Delaware. Wire transfers to Nevada. Phantom subcontractors billing for materials that never arrived. And at the center, their daughter. I confronted her privately, Helen wrote. I thought if I showed her I knew, she would stop. I was wrong. Evelyn looked at me across her desk and said, You tell Dad, and I will destroy him. I will make the world believe he is sick. I will take everything, and he will spend his last years in a facility wondering why no one visits. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking so badly the words blurred. Evelyn had threatened Helen, looked her mother in the eyes, and promised to destroy me. And Helen carried that threat in silence for 22 months without telling me. The letter answered my unspoken question. I know you will ask why I did not come to you. Because Evelyn was watching you. She had already started building the Alzheimer's narrative, already contacted doctors, already begun fabricating records. If I had told you, you would have confronted her, and she would have activated her plan immediately. You would have been committed before you could fight back. I needed time. I needed to build something stronger than her lies. So Helen built. For 18 months, while cooking dinners and attending board meetings, my wife waged a secret war. She documented every shell company, traced every wire transfer, cataloged every suspicious construction death, all while Evelyn watched her, looking for signs that Mother knew. Daniel discovered the same theft independently through his IT access. He came to me 8 months ago, frightened and furious. I told him everything. He wanted to go to you immediately. I begged him not to, not until we had enough. My son, 27 years old. He found the truth, and instead of running, he joined his mother's war. 8 months gathering digital evidence while Helen gathered financial records. 2 soldiers protecting a man who had no idea he was under siege. Helen described the escape plan. The cabin, purchased under her maiden name, Helen Ashworth, through a buried trust. The renovation contracted through a Milwaukee firm with no connection to Bishop and Associates. The safe installed by a Grand Rapids security company. Everything paid in cash. Everything untraceable. The money. I moved $85 million into Swiss accounts under the Ashworth name. My father's inheritance from 2015, which I never told anyone about. Evelyn does not know it exists. Miranda Chen in New York has all the account information. She is expecting you. 85 million. An inheritance Helen never mentioned, used as seed capital for an entire escape infrastructure. Cabin. Swiss accounts. Legal team. Built on money Evelyn never knew existed. 4 months before I died, Helen wrote. And the past tense told me she wrote this expecting death. I contacted FBI Special Agent Thomas Reeves in Chicago, Financial Crimes Division. I provided preliminary evidence. He opened a case. But federal investigations move slowly. The FBI needs a formal complainant to proceed with arrests. If I am gone, it must be you. Do you understand what my wife did? 22 months building a trap while living inside the monster's mouth. Gathering evidence, moving money, hiring lawyers, contacting law enforcement. All while smiling at family dinners, knowing her daughter was planning to kill her. The letter's final page shattered me. Daniel discovered the construction deaths 3 months ago. 14 workers, Walter. Our daughter killed 14 people through deliberate material substitution. Daniel was gathering engineering evidence when Evelyn became suspicious. She accelerated her timeline because of him. If you are reading this, she acted. Helen's handwriting grew shakier on the last paragraph. I need you to know 3 things. 1. Evelyn killed Daniel because he found the 14 bodies. Our son died trying to save strangers. Be proud of him, Walter. Then be angry. 2. The fake will is my creation. I wrote it. I recorded the video knowing Evelyn would use it. I made it convincing because I needed her to believe she had won. If she believes she won, she will not search for evidence. 3. Find Daniel's last blueprint. Project 14. Every answer is in the architecture. And Walter, I loved you every single day. Even the days I could not tell you why I was afraid. Especially those days. Finish what we started. For Daniel. For the 14. For us. Yours always, and beyond, Helen. I held my wife's last words and wept. Not the controlled grief of the funeral. I wept the way a building collapses when its foundation is removed. Completely. Without reservation. Helen sacrificed herself for me. She wrote a fake will that made the world hate her husband, so her husband would survive. She lived inside a lie for 22 months to give me a chance at truth. And Daniel, my brave, impossible son, he chose to stay. He chose to gather evidence knowing what Evelyn was capable of. He chose his father's life over his own. They did not just die. They chose to die for me. The cardboard tube sat beside me. Project 14. Daniel's last blueprint. The answer, Helen said, was hidden in the architecture. My wife went to war for me and never spoke a word. My son stood between me and a killer and never asked for thanks. I owed them more than grief. I owed them the one thing Helen asked for. Finish what we started. Daniel had drawn me a map to his sister's crimes. He hid it the only way an architect's son would, inside the blueprints. I lifted the cardboard tube with trembling hands. The cap came off with a hollow pop, and I slid out 14 sheets of architectural paper. Large format. A1 size. The kind we used for final presentation drawings at Bishop and Associates. Each sheet crisp and white, rolled tight, smelling faintly of the plotter ink Daniel always got on his shirt cuffs. I spread them across the cabin floor one by one, weighting the corners with books and coffee mugs. Helen had stocked in the kitchen. 14 drawings, 14 buildings, each one rendered in Daniel's precise hand, every line clean, every dimension noted, every structural detail documented with the care I had taught him since he was old enough to hold a pencil. At first glance, they were simply beautiful architecture. Floor plans, elevations, section cuts, the kind of drawings any firm would frame and display in their lobby. Daniel had inherited my eye for proportion and Helen's gift for clarity. These were the drawings of a talented young architect documenting completed projects. But I am not any architect. I am the man who taught Daniel to draw. And within 30 seconds of studying the first sheet, I saw what no one else on earth would see. The grid lines were wrong. Not wrong in a way that would matter structurally. Wrong in a way that only mattered if you knew our language. When Daniel was 12 years old, fascinated by codes and secrets the way all 12-year-old boys are, I taught him a game. We called it hidden dimensions. You embed information inside a technical drawing by manipulating the grid spacing. Standard architectural grids use regular intervals. But if you shift certain grid lines by specific increments, those increments become numbers. Numbers become letters. Letters become words. No one would ever notice. Grid lines are background noise on a blueprint. They are the scaffolding that disappears once the building is complete. But if you know to look, if you know the cipher, those invisible lines become a message written in the language of architecture. Daniel had written me 14 messages, one hidden inside each drawing. I grabbed a pencil and a notepad from the kitchen and knelt on the floor like a man performing surgery. My reading glasses slid down my nose as I measured grid spacings with a scale ruler Helen had left in the cabin's single-desk drawer. Of course, she left a scale ruler. She thought of everything. The first drawing, Riverside Complex, the building where James Kowalski fell from scaffolding in 2013. I measured the grid deviations, converted them to our cipher, and letters emerged from the mathematics. J. Kowalski, April 12, 2013. Scaffold connector substitution. GPS coordinates: 40, 1.8 to 7 north, 87.6 to 2 west. Material order signed EBK. Death ruled accidental. Everything. Daniel had encoded everything. The victim's name, the date, the method, the location, the authorization. Each blueprint was simultaneously a beautiful architectural drawing and a complete criminal evidence file, invisible to anyone who did not know our father-son cipher. I decoded the second drawing. Lakeside Towers, Maria Santos, September 2014. Concrete panel failure, substandard mix specification. The third, Industrial Park 7, Thomas Wright, February 2015. Structural beam failure, load capacity falsified on inspection reports. I worked through the night. Each drawing took roughly 40 minutes to decode. 40 minutes of measuring millimeter variations in grid lines, converting distances to numbers, numbers to letters, letters to the names of dead workers and the methods that killed them. My back ached from kneeling. My eyes burned. But I could not stop. Each decoded blueprint was Daniel's voice speaking to me from beyond death, saying, "I found them, Dad. I found every single one." By the time pale morning light crept through the cabin windows, I had decoded 13 drawings, 13 victims, 13 crime scenes hidden inside beautiful architecture. Daniel had turned his profession into a weapon, using the very language Evelyn exploited to kill people as the medium to document her crimes. The 14th drawing waited. Meridian Tower, Daniel's last project. The building where he and Helen died on October 15th. My hands shook as I spread it flat on the floor. This drawing was different from the others. More detailed. More personal. The line weighed heavier, as if Daniel had pressed harder with his pencil. As if he knew this one mattered most. I measured the grid deviations. Converted. Decoded. The message was longer than the others. It filled my entire notepad page. Meridian Tower. Scaffold connectors substituted September 26th, 3 weeks before scheduled load test. Grade 40 replaced with grade 20. Authorization EBK. This building will kill me. I know it. The connectors will fail under full crew weight. I reported the substitution to site management. They buried it. Evelyn controls them all. Mom knows. We sent everything to Agent Reeves October 15th. If I am dead, the evidence is delivered. Tell Dad. Tell him I am sorry I did not call back. Tell him I am proud to be his son. October 15th. The day Daniel died. He sent the evidence to the FBI the same day the scaffolding collapsed. He knew it was coming. He felt the deadline approaching the way you feel a building settling under too much weight, and he chose to stay. He chose to finish the transmission. He chose to make sure the evidence reached Reeves before the building reached him. My son drew his own murder scene and hid it in a blueprint only I could read. He encoded his last words. Inside the architecture, I taught him to love. And his final message was not fear. It was not regret. It was an apology for not calling me back. An apology for dying before he could say goodbye properly. I sat on that cabin floor, surrounded by 14 decoded blueprints, and cried the way only a father can cry for a son who died a hero without anyone knowing. Daniel was 27 years old. He had his whole life mapped out. Architecture firm by 30, marriage by 32, children by 35. He told me those plans over beers last summer, eyes bright with the certainty of youth. Instead, he drew 14 murder scenes in invisible ink and died on the last one. I gathered the blueprints carefully, rolling each one and replacing them in the tube. These were not just evidence. They were Daniel's legacy. His final act of architecture. 14 buildings that killed people, documented by the 15th person they would kill, preserved in the language of the profession that connected father to son across life and death. Have you ever received a message from someone you will never see again? Not a text. Not a voicemail. A message written in a language only 2 people in the world can read. That is what Daniel gave me. A conversation no one can overhear. A blueprint no one can decode. A son reaching across death to hand his father the tools of justice. I will not waste this, Daniel. I swear it. 3 in the morning. The cabin was dark except for the single lamp above the kitchen counter. I had been awake for nearly 24 hours, kneeling on floors, decoding blueprints, reading my dead wife's handwriting until the letters swam. My back screamed. My knees had gone from aching to numb to something beyond pain. And my mind, the mind Evelyn told the world was failing, had processed more information in one night than most people process in a year. $72 million stolen. 14 workers dead. My wife and son murdered. A fake will designed to protect me. An FBI case waiting for my voice to activate it. 85 million in Switzerland. A lawyer in New York. A blueprint cipher only I could read. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and felt the weight of it crushing me flat. Not the information. The loneliness. Helen had carried this for 22 months. Daniel for 8. They had shouldered this burden together, in secret, while I remained oblivious. And now they were gone, and the burden was mine alone. All of it. Every document. Every dead worker. Every lie. Every truth. Mine to carry, mine to deliver, mine to survive long enough to use. I was 63 years old. I was exhausted beyond anything I had ever experienced. And I was alone in a way that no amount of evidence or money or planning could fix. I needed water. My throat felt like sandpaper. I pulled myself up using the counter edge and opened the cabinet above the sink. And there, on the middle shelf, sat a bottle of Maker's Mark bourbon and a white prescription bottle. The bourbon was full. The prescription label read, Zolpidem, 30 tablets, 10 milligrams each. Enough to sleep, enough to stop. I stood there holding the cabinet door open, staring at those 2 objects, and understood instantly that Helen had placed them there on purpose. Not as a temptation, as a test. She knew me. She knew that after absorbing everything in that safe, after decoding Daniel's final message, after sitting alone at 3 in the morning with the full weight of our family's destruction pressing down on my chest, I would reach a breaking point. She knew I would open this cabinet looking for water and find something else instead. Have you ever held your own ending in your hands? Stood at the threshold between continuing and stopping, and felt the pull of stopping like gravity? That bottle of bourbon and those 30 pills were the simplest architecture I had ever encountered. No complex engineering, no hidden ciphers, just a straightforward solution to an unbearable problem. I took the bourbon down from the shelf. The glass was cool and heavy in my palm. I unscrewed the cap and the smell hit me, sweet and sharp and promising numbness. I could drink until the numbers stopped adding up in my head, until the names of 14 dead workers stopped echoing. Until Daniel's last words stopped replaying on a loop I could not silence. I raised the bottle, and then I saw it. A yellow post-it note stuck to the bottom of the bottle where it had been hidden by the shelf. Helen's handwriting. Small and precise. If you found the whiskey, you are at the edge. I know. I have been at that edge too. Read the envelope behind the bathroom mirror. Then choose. I set the bottle down so hard bourbon sloshed over the rim. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. Not from exhaustion. From the sudden, piercing realization that my wife had seen this moment. She had stood in this cabin, months before her death, and envisioned exactly where I would be at 3 in the morning. She had predicted my breaking point with architectural precision, and she had built a support beam exactly where the structure would need it most. The bathroom mirror was small, rectangular, mounted with simple brackets. I lifted it off the wall. Behind it, taped to the drywall, was a cream-colored envelope. My name on the front. Walter. Nothing else. I tore it open. One page. Shorter than the letter in the safe. More urgent. Written not by the strategic Helen who planned escapes, but by the Helen who loved me, the woman who held my hand during my father's funeral, who talked me through the depression I never told anyone about 10 years ago, who knew every crack in my foundation because she had helped build me. Walter, I know you. I know this moment. You are standing in the dark holding a bottle and thinking there is nothing left, that the weight is too much, that no one needs you alive. You are wrong. There are 14 families who will never know justice unless you walk out of this cabin alive. There is an FBI agent waiting for a voice that is not mine and is not Daniel's. There is a daughter who must answer for what she has done, and a world that deserves to know the truth. I did not build this cabin so you could die in it. I built it so you could leave it. Armed. Angry. Alive. Choose rage over silence. Choose justice over peace. Choose to live, because I chose to die so you could. Do not make my death meaningless. Do not make Daniel's sacrifice a waste. Stand up, put the bottle down, and walk out that door when the sun rises. I love you. I love you. I love you. Now fight. I read those words 7 times. Standing in that tiny bathroom, bare feet on cold tile, the mirror leaning against the wall, the bourbon still open on the kitchen counter. I read them until my hands stopped shaking, until my breathing steadied, until the gravitational pull of the cabinet shelf lost its power. Helen knew I would break. She planned for it the way she planned for everything. She left the bourbon there as bait, knowing I would find it, knowing the post-it would catch me mid-fall. Even in this, even in my darkest moment, she was the architect, and I was the building she refused to let collapse. I walked back to the kitchen. I poured the bourbon down the sink. I flushed the pills down the toilet. I watched them disappear and felt something shift inside me. Not healing. Something harder. Something with edges. Rage. The cold, load-bearing kind. The kind that does not shatter windows. The kind that draws blueprints for demolition. By dawn, I had packed the evidence into the waterproof backpack Helen left in the bedroom closet. Folders, blueprints, flash drives, all sealed in plastic bags inside a bag designed to survive submersion. I memorized Miranda Chen's phone number from the contact card Helen taped inside the safe's lid. I checked the cabin one final time, confirming I had left nothing irreplaceable behind. The sun rose over Lake Michigan and painted the water gold. I stood on the porch of my wife's final architecture and made a promise. I will not waste your sacrifice, Helen. I will not waste Daniel's blueprint. I will walk into that sunrise, and I will not stop until Evelyn answers for every name on that list. I had a plan. Miranda Chen, in New York. Thomas Reeves at the FBI. $85 million waiting in Switzerland. And 14 families who deserve to know why their fathers and husbands never came home. Tomorrow I would leave. Tonight I would sleep. The first real sleep since the funeral. Because for the first time in weeks, I had something stronger than grief. I had purpose. I had planned to leave at dawn. Helen's plan was clear. Drive east. Find Miranda Chen. Contact the FBI. Let the legal machinery grind Evelyn to dust. Simple. Methodical. The way an architect approaches demolition. One calculated step at a time. But Evelyn did not give me until dawn. 5 days. I had been at the cabin for 5 days, long enough to decode 14 blueprints, long enough to read every document in that safe, long enough for my daughter to notice that the broken old man she sent to die in a lakeside ruin had not called, had not checked in, had not done any of the things a man with Alzheimer's was supposed to do, like wander, like panic, like beg for help. I should have called her. I should have played the role. Confused father, lost and afraid, harmless and grateful for whatever scraps his daughter tossed him. But I was too deep in Helen's evidence to remember I was supposed to be performing weakness. That mistake nearly killed me. It was 11:14 at night. I know the exact time because I was checking the clock when the headlights appeared. Two beams of white cutting through the tree line at the end of the gravel road. Then a second pair behind them. Two vehicles, moving slow. No rush. The unhurried approach of people who believe their prey cannot run. I killed the cabin lamp and pressed myself against the wall beside the window. The darkness was instant and total. Outside, engines growled closer, tires crunching gravel, the sound of predators who do not bother being quiet because they do not respect their target. Two black SUVs pulled to a stop 30 yards from the cabin. Doors opened. 4 figures emerged into the November night. I could not see faces, only silhouettes backlit by headlights. 3 of them were large, professional. The 4th was smaller, familiar in the way he held his shoulders, the way he rolled his neck before walking toward a task he found distasteful. Raymond. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up the darkness like a flare. A text from Evelyn. Hi, Daddy. Raymond says you have been very quiet. That worries me. Come outside so we can talk. I just want to know you are safe. Safe. The woman who murdered her mother and brother wanted to know I was safe. The woman who sent 4 men to my cabin at 11 at night was concerned about my well-being. I tasted something metallic in my mouth. Fear or fury? In that moment, they felt identical. I had seconds to decide. The evidence was spread across the kitchen table. Folders, blueprints, the flash drive Helen had included in the safe. If Raymond reached that table, everything Helen and Daniel died for would disappear, burned or shredded or buried in a hole that no FBI agent would ever find. I typed back with shaking fingers. Just resting, sweetheart. Quiet here. Lots of dust and old memories. Nothing interesting. Your mother's old things, mostly. Send. Then I moved. The waterproof backpack was already packed from this morning. Helen had thought of everything, including the backpack's location. It hung on a hook beside the bedroom window. The bedroom window that faced the lake. The opposite direction from the gravel road, where 4 men were now walking toward the front porch. I pulled on dark clothes. Navy sweater. Black work pants from the closet. Grabbed the backpack. Checked the side pocket where I had secured the flash drive in a Ziploc bag. Everything Helen and Daniel left me, every document, every blueprint, every decoded message, was inside that waterproof shell. My phone buzzed again. That is good, Daddy. Rest is important for your condition. Raymond is just going to check the property. Make sure everything is secure. Stay inside. We love you. We love you. 4 men approaching my cabin in the dark, and she signed off with, "We love you." I felt the bile rise and swallowed it down. Through the bedroom window I could see the lake, black and infinite, stretching toward a horizon that did not exist in the darkness. And between me and that water, barely visible in the starlight, Helen's garden shed, 20 yards from the back of the cabin. I had explored it on day 2. Garden tools, a deflated inner tube, a stack of firewood, and pushed against the far wall beneath a canvas tarp, a yellow kayak with a single paddle. Helen left me a boat. Of course she did. She built an entire escape route and included a lifeboat. Footsteps on the front porch, heavy. Multiple sets. The boards creaked the way they had creaked under my weight 5 days ago, but louder now, more aggressive. Someone was testing the front door handle. I eased the bedroom window up. Helen had oiled these tracks. The window slid open without a sound. Cold November air poured in, carrying the smell of lake water and dead leaves. I threw one leg over the sill, then the other, and dropped 3 feet to the frozen ground below. The impact jarred my knees. 63 years old. My body was not built for this. But adrenaline is a remarkable architect. It redesigns your limits in real time. I ran 20 yards to the shed. I covered it in seconds, each footstep placed carefully on grass instead of gravel, staying silent, staying low. Behind me, I heard the front door open. Not kicked. Unlocked. Raymond had a key. Evelyn gave him a key to the cabin she told me was mine. The shed door was already unlatched. I had left it that way 2 days ago out of laziness. Now that laziness saved my life. I slipped inside, found the kayak by touch, and dragged it toward the shed's rear opening that faced the water. Voices from inside the cabin. Raymond's baritone. Check everywhere. She wants the laptop, any documents, anything that looks like files. If he is here, bring him outside. They were not here to talk. They were here to recover evidence and remove me, permanently. The pretense of Evelyn's loving text messages dissolved in Raymond's businesslike instructions. I dragged the kayak across 20 feet of sand and rock, the hull scraping against frozen ground. Too loud. Far too loud. But the cabin was between me and them, and the night wind off the lake covered the smaller sounds. I hit the waterline and the cold shocked through my shoes, my ankles, my calves. Lake Michigan, in November. 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough to kill a man in 20 minutes if he stayed submerged. I pushed the kayak into black water and climbed in. The paddle was strapped to the hull with bungee cords. I freed it with numb fingers and took the first stroke. Behind me, light exploded from the cabin. Every window blazing. They had found the switches. They would see the safe standing open. They would see the kitchen table cleared. They would know I had taken everything. Raymond's voice carried across the water, faint but clear. He is not here. Check the shed. Check the shore. Now, I paddled harder. The kayak cut through black water, each stroke pulling me farther from shore, farther from Raymond, farther from 4 men who would kill me for what I carried on my back. Lake Michigan stretched before me, enormous and freezing, and completely dark. Behind me, a flashlight beam swept the beach. Then another. Then the yellow-white cone of a vehicle spotlight, swinging toward the water. I was 30 yards out. 40. The spotlight hit the water's surface 20 feet to my left and swept toward me. I stopped paddling and lay flat in the kayak, pressing my body against the hull, making myself as small as possible against the black water. The light passed over me, paused, moved on, came back. Then the wind picked up, and the first waves hit. You want to know what it feels like to paddle a kayak across Lake Michigan in November? It does not feel like anything. Because after the first 5 minutes, you stop feeling altogether. 41 degrees. That is the water temperature in Lake Michigan in mid-November. I know this now. I did not know it then. What I knew was that my hands stopped obeying me after the first 100 strokes. That my feet, soaked from pushing the kayak offshore, had become abstract concepts attached to the ends of my legs. That the wind was building from the northwest, pushing 3-foot swells against the side of my kayak with a rhythm that felt like the lake was trying to decide whether to swallow me or spit me out. The spotlight had swept past me twice. Each time I pressed myself flat and felt the cold hull against my chest, felt the water seep through my sweater, felt my body temperature drop another degree. After the second pass, the light retreated toward shore. I heard engine sounds, doors slamming, voices carried and shredded by the wind. Raymond was searching the shoreline, expecting me to have landed somewhere close. He did not think a 63-year-old man would be stupid enough to paddle into open water on a November night. He was right. It was stupid. But stupidity and survival sometimes share the same address. I sat up and paddled. East. That was all I knew. The shore I needed was east. The shore behind me was death. So I paddled east into blackness, into waves, into wind that cut through my wet clothes like it was punishing me for daring to exist. Let me tell you about cold. Not winter morning cold. Not forgot your jacket cold. The cold that lives in 41-degree water. The cold that does not attack your skin. It attacks your mind. First, it takes your fingers. Then your coordination. Then your ability to think in complete sentences. You start making bargains with yourself. Just 10 more strokes. Just 5 more minutes. Just keep the paddle moving, and you will not die out here. I counted strokes. 100. 200. 300. The rhythm kept me focused, kept my brain from shutting down. Helen's voice in my head counting with me. 1, 2, 3. The way she counted when I was in the hospital after my back surgery, coaching me through physical therapy. Keep going, Walter. One more. Just one more. At stroke 412, a wave caught the paddle blade at the wrong angle. The force ripped the right side from my grip. I lunged for it, and the kayak tilted. Water poured over the edge, ice cold against my thighs. I grabbed the paddle shaft with both hands, but the right blade was cracked. Useless. I was left with half a paddle in the middle of Lake Michigan. Single-blade paddling in a kayak is an exercise in futility. Every stroke pulls you in a circle. You compensate, overcorrect, waste energy fighting physics instead of crossing distance. My arms burned. My lungs burned. My core temperature was dropping, and I could feel it in the way my thoughts were slowing, stretching like taffy pulled too thin. I lost direction. The shore behind me was gone. The shore ahead was invisible. The waves came from everywhere and nowhere. The stars were hidden behind cloud cover, and without stars, without landmarks, without anything but black water and black sky, I was paddling in circles, dying in circles. Have you ever been lost in a way that has no compass, no landmark, no reference point? That is hypothermia's gift. It takes your sense of direction first, then your sense of time, then your sense of self. I was all three kinds of lost on that lake, and the water was patient. It did not need to rush. 41 degrees does its work slowly, reliably, inevitably. I do not know how long I paddled. Minutes. Hours. Time had become meaningless. A frozen abstraction no more real than the feeling in my feet. My strokes grew shorter, weaker. The half paddle dipped and rose with decreasing conviction. My body was making its own decisions now, independent of whatever my mind wanted. And my body had decided that stopping was easier than continuing. Then I saw it, a light, small and yellow and steady, not a spotlight, not a vehicle, a building light, fixed, constant, somewhere ahead and to the right, glowing through the darkness like a single candle in an infinite room. I turned toward it. Every remaining ounce of will I possessed went into adjusting my angle and paddling toward that yellow point. Stroke, 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 each one weaker than the last, each one purchased with currency I was running out of. The light grew larger, brighter. I could make out a shape behind it. A building, low and square. Windows, 200 yards, 100, 50. The wave hit me from the left side without warning. A rogue swell, larger than the others, catching the kayak broadside. The world tilted. I grabbed for the edges and found nothing but water. The kayak flipped, and Lake Michigan swallowed me whole. 41 degrees, full immersion. The shock was absolute. Every muscle in my body seized simultaneously. My lungs clenched, refusing to breathe. The cold was not temperature. It was voltage. It was a current running through every nerve, every cell, every thought I had left. The backpack. The evidence. It was strapped to my chest. Waterproof. Sealed, but heavy. It pulled me down. I kicked toward the surface, or what I thought was the surface. In the dark, underwater, there is no up. There is only the direction your body remembers from a lifetime of standing upright. I broke the surface gasping, swallowed water, coughed, swallowed more. The kayak was gone, inverted somewhere in the darkness. But the light was still there. Closer now. 50 yards, Maybe less. 50 yards. In a swimming pool, that is nothing. In 41-degree water, at night, with a 20-pound backpack strapped to your chest, at 63 years old, with hypothermia already shutting down your extremities, 50 yards is a marathon. 50 yards is the distance between living and dying. I swam. Not gracefully. Not efficiently. I thrashed and kicked and pulled water with hands I could no longer feel, dragging myself toward that yellow light with nothing left but the stubborn refusal to let my daughter win. Helen did not build that cabin so I could drown 50 yards from shore. Daniel did not encode 14 murder scenes so they could sink to the bottom of Lake Michigan. My knee hit sand. I did not feel it. I saw it, my leg bending at an unexpected angle, and realized I was in the shallows. I crawled, hands and knees across sand and rocks and frozen mud, dragging the backpack, dragging myself, pulling my body out of water that had nearly become my grave. I collapsed face down on the beach, sand against my cheek, the backpack pressing against my spine, my lungs heaving, my body shaking so violently I could hear my own teeth rattling. Above me, a sign. I tilted my head, squinting through eyes blurred by water and exhaustion and the beginning stages of hypothermic shutdown. Yellow light illuminated painted letters on weathered wood. Kowalski's Bakery. Open. Since 1987. Kowalski. The same name as victim number 1 on Daniel's list. James Kowalski. The first man Evelyn's cost-cutting killed. I had crawled out of Lake Michigan and landed at the doorstep of a name that already haunted me. The universe has a sense of architecture. Even in chaos, it builds connections. The light blurred. The letters faded. And everything went black. I woke to the smell of bread. Fresh bread and strong coffee, and something sweet, baking in an oven close by. For one impossible second, I thought I was in Helen's kitchen on a Sunday morning, that I would open my eyes and see her standing at the counter in her faded blue robe, flower on her cheek, humming off key. I opened my eyes and saw a ceiling I did not recognize. Pressed tin, painted cream, cracked in places but clean. I was lying on a sofa beneath a wool blanket. My clothes were different. Dry flannel shirt, sweatpants, thick socks. Someone had changed me while I was unconscious. You are awake. Good. The voice came from my left. Deep and accented. Polish. A man stood in a doorway wiping flour from enormous hands. 60 years old, broad-shouldered. A face built from hard work and harder winters, with kind eyes set deep beneath a heavy brow. He wore a white apron over flannel and looked at me the way you look at a stray you found in the rain. I am Stan. Stan Kowalski. This is my bakery. I found you on the beach at 4 this morning. You were nearly dead. Kowalski. The name hit me like a second wave of cold water. James Kowalski. Victim number 1 on Daniel's list. April 2013. Scaffolding collapse. Was it coincidence? I could not tell. The universe seemed to be placing me in locations with architectural precision. How? I managed. My voice was barely human. I come in at 4 to start the dough. Saw something on the beach. Thought it was a seal at first. Then I saw the backpack. Stan pointed to the corner where my waterproof backpack sat intact against the wall. I did not open it. Not my business. A woman appeared behind him. Shorter, rounder, silver-streaked hair. The kind of face that has smiled so many times the lines have become permanent. She carried a tray. Soup, bread, coffee. I am Agnes. You eat. Then we talk. Or we do not talk. Up to you. I ate. Potato and leek soup, thick and hot. Bread still warm from the oven, dense and dark. I ate 2 bowls, 3 pieces of bread. Drank coffee until my hands stopped shaking. Stan and Agnes moved around their bakery preparing for the day. The quiet rhythm of people who build something small and good every morning. The normalcy of it undid me in ways the cold had not. What happened? Stan asked. He stood at his work table, kneading dough, not looking at me. Family trouble. My daughter took everything. sent people to finish what she started. Stan's hands paused on the dough, just for a moment. Then he resumed. Family trouble. He glanced at Agnes. She nodded once. A conversation, in the silent language, of 30 years together. We do not need details, Mr. Bishop. They had checked my wallet. I waited for recognition, for news stories about my supposed disease. Nothing. Stan kept kneading. Agnes kept stacking loaves. My name meant nothing to them beyond the man on their sofa. You need somewhere to go? Stan asked. East. New York. He nodded as if men crawled out of Lake Michigan asking for rides to New York every Tuesday. He removed a key from his apron pocket and set it on the counter. Blue Ford Outback. 2004. My son Tommy's. Deployed overseas. 6 months at least. Runs fine. Gas is full. I cannot take your son's truck. You can, and you will. Agnes disappeared into the back and returned with a paper bag. Bread for the road, thermos of coffee, and this. She pressed $300 into my hand. I stared at them. These strangers who responded to a hypothermic man on their beach, not with questions, but with soup and bread and truck keys. Why? I asked. You do not know me. Stan stopped kneading. He wiped his hands and looked at me with something old and deep in his eyes. My boy Tommy. Before the army, he ran into trouble. Bad trouble. Had to leave fast. Middle of the night. Strangers kept him alive. People he never met. Fed him, drove him, gave him a place when his own family could not reach him in time. Stan placed both hands flat on the counter. We keep each other alive, Mr. Bishop. That is how the world is supposed to work. It does not always. But today, here, it does. Agnes handed me a folded paper, a list of Polish churches along I-90, Street Stanislaus in South Bend, Holy Rosary in Cleveland, Street Adalbert in Buffalo, places where a man could rest without questions. Go, she said. Do what you need to do. When it is over, come back and tell us you are all right. I stood in their bakery, wearing their son's clothes, holding their son's key, and I wept. Not silent tears. The kind that shakes your body. Stan turned back to his dough. Agnes squeezed my shoulder and walked away. They gave me privacy for my gratitude the way truly kind people always do. Do you know what it feels like to be saved by strangers? Not in a movie. No speeches. No music. Just bread and coffee and a truck key and the quiet faith that helping matters even when you will never know the full story. Stan and Agnes Kowalski gave me something my daughter tried to steal. Belief. Belief that the world still contained people who built instead of destroyed. I drove east at 6:45. The blue Ford smelled like pine air freshener and motor oil. Agnes's bread sat on the passenger seat. The backpack was secure in the footwell. Lake Michigan disappeared behind me, silver in the early light. 12 hours to New York. Between a bakery in Michigan and a lawyer in Manhattan. Between the kindness of strangers and the justice my wife engineered from beyond the grave. Miranda Chen was expecting me. And I was done running. Miranda Chen looked nothing like a corporate lawyer. She looked like someone who had spent 20 years dismantling criminals and enjoyed every second. I arrived at her office at 7 in the evening, after 12 hours on I-90. The building was glass and steel in Midtown Manhattan, 47th floor. Miranda met me in the lobby, 48 years old, silver hair cropped close, charcoal suit, no jewelry except a watch that cost more than Stan Kowalski's truck. She had the posture of a former prosecutor and the eyes of someone who counted convictions like trophies. Mr. Bishop, your wife told me you would come. I have been waiting 2 years. 2 years. Helen contacted this woman before the evidence. Before Daniel's discovery. Before the scaffold collapse. Helen saw something in Evelyn long before the embezzlement and began building legal infrastructure while I remained blind. Miranda led me to a conference room overlooking Central Park. The city sprawled below, lit and indifferent to the man carrying 14 murder scenes in a backpack. wearing borrowed clothes, smelling of lake water and Polish bread. She laid out 18 months of Helen's war in precise, methodical language. Helen approached me in March of 2017. She described financial irregularities. She suspected her daughter. She paid my retainer in cash. We never communicated electronically. Miranda opened a leather portfolio. Documents, account statements, trust registrations, all bearing the name Helen Ashworth. Your wife moved $85 million into Swiss accounts over 14 months. Her father's inheritance plus private investment returns. The money is clean, legal, and yours. She paused. Helen also retained my firm to represent you in all criminal and civil proceedings, prepaid for 5 years. My wife hired me a lawyer for 5 years, paid in advance, because Helen knew this fight would not end quickly. There is one more element. Miranda turned her laptop toward me. A video call connected. The face that appeared was male, early 50s, cropped hair going gray. The kind of face that testifies before congressional committees without blinking. Navy suit, government office, American flag in the corner. Mr. Bishop, Special Agent Thomas Reeves, FBI Financial Crimes Division, Chicago. Your wife contacted my office 20 months ago. Your son provided digital evidence on October 15th, the day of his death. I have been waiting for you to surface. I pulled the backpack onto the conference table and laid everything out. Folders, flash drives, Daniel's blueprint tube, each piece arranged like surgical instruments on polished mahogany. Everything my wife and son gathered. Financial records, 14 blueprint-encoded crime scenes, procurement orders proving deliberate scaffold sabotage. Reeves leaned forward through the screen. Courier the originals to Chicago. Forensic verification takes 72 hours. Once we confirm authenticity, we move immediately. The warrant application has been drafted since October. We have been waiting for a living complainant. A living complainant. That was what I had become. The last surviving witness. Helen and Daniel built the weapon. I was the trigger. 72 hours, I said. Then what? Then we arrest Evelyn Bishop Cross. Charges include embezzlement, wire fraud, 14 counts of negligent homicide, 2 counts of first-degree murder, and conspiracy to commit additional murder given the events at the cabin. The call ended. Miranda closed the laptop. Your wife was remarkable. In 20 years of practice, I have never seen anyone build a more comprehensive legal trap. Helen constructed the prosecution's entire case. All the FBI needs is your signature and your voice on record. I sat surrounded by $85 million of protection and a federal case 2 years in the making, and allowed myself to feel something I had not felt since the funeral. Safety. Then Miranda reached for the television remote. I think you should see this. CNN filled the screen. My daughter sat in a studio wearing black, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The headline scrolled beneath. Desperate search continues for missing Chicago architect. Daughter fears father may have harmed himself. She was perfect. The trembling lip, the voice catching at rehearsed moments. She looked directly into the camera. My father is not well. He has been struggling with cognitive decline for years. We are terrified that in his confused state, he may have wandered somewhere dangerous. If anyone has seen him, please. We just want him home safe. I watched my daughter perform grief on national television. The same daughter who sent 4 men to kill me 2 nights ago. Who murdered her mother and brother. She manufactured tears for millions of viewers, building public sympathy the way she built shell companies. With precision. With calculation. Have you ever watched someone you raised lie to the entire world? Watch them cry tears that do not exist for a concern they do not feel. It is like watching a building that looks perfect from the outside, while knowing every load-bearing beam is rotten. The structure is beautiful. The collapse is inevitable. And you are the only one who can see it coming. Miranda turned off the television. She is building a narrative. If you surface now, she frames you as mentally incompetent, delusional, Every word you say gets dismissed as the ravings of a sick old man. I know. That is why I am not surfacing until the FBI moves first. Miranda nodded. Good. You understand the game. I understood perfectly. Evelyn had 72 hours of freedom left. And somewhere behind those manufactured tears, behind that flawless CNN performance, I had seen something the cameras missed. A flicker the audience would not notice, but a father would. Fear. The fear of someone who has lost control of a variable she cannot locate. I was that variable. And in 3 days, I would become her destruction. November 23rd. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of sitting in a Manhattan hotel room Miranda had secured under the Ashworth name. Watching the clock, checking my phone, eating room service food I could not taste. 3 days of listening to my own heartbeat and wondering if something would go wrong at the last moment. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Thomas Reeves called. Forensics verified everything. Authentic. Comprehensive. Damning. He paused. Warrant executed. Arrest teams deployed 15 minutes ago. Chicago and Winnetka. Simultaneously. It is happening now, Mr. Bishop. Turn on your television. I fumbled for the remote. My hands were shaking. The screen bloomed to life, and there it was, live coverage. A helicopter shot of a building I recognized because I had designed it 8 years ago. Bishop Tower. 42 stories of glass and steel on the Chicago waterfront. My name in gold letters, 40 feet tall across the entrance facade. And below those letters, 500 people in evening wear milling on a red-carpeted plaza. The building's grand reopening ceremony. Evelyn had spent months planning this event. A celebration of her leadership. A monument to her vision. She had invited every client, every politician, every journalist who mattered in Chicago. She had built herself a stage, and the FBI was about to use it. The helicopter camera zoomed. I could see the podium where Evelyn would have been speaking, the champagne tables, the string quartet in the corner, and then, cutting through the crowd like a blade through silk, a line of dark suits moving with federal precision. 8 agents, 10, 12, spreading through the crowd, positioning themselves at exits, forming a perimeter that the 500 guests did not yet understand was a cage. The news anchor spoke over the footage. We are receiving reports of federal law enforcement activity at the Bishop Tower reopening ceremony in Chicago. Agents appear to be moving through the crowd toward the main stage area. I leaned forward until my face was inches from the screen. There, center stage. Evelyn stood at the podium in a white designer gown, mid-sentence, champagne flute in hand. Even from the helicopter angle, I could see her posture. Confident, commanding. The CEO addressing her kingdom. She had not yet noticed the dark suits converging. Then she noticed. Her head turned. The champagne flute paused halfway to her lips. I watched my daughter's body language shift in real time. The subtle stiffening of her spine. The way her free hand gripped the podium edge. She saw them. She understood. And for one fraction of a second, captured on live television and broadcast to 3 million viewers, my daughter's mask cracked. Not grief. Not confusion. Rage. Pure, animal rage. The rage of a predator caught in a trap built by prey she had already killed. The lead agent reached the podium. He spoke words I could not hear from the helicopter feed, but I knew what they were. The same words spoken at 100,000 arrests. Federal agents. Warrant for your arrest. Hands where we can see them. Evelyn did not run. She did not scream. She set her champagne flute on the podium with deliberate care, straightened her white gown, and extended her wrists. Even in surrender, she performed. Even in handcuffs, she choreographed. The agents cuffed her in front of 500 frozen guests, and my daughter lifted her chin and walked through that crowd as if she were still their queen. But the cameras caught what the crowd could not see. Her jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped beneath her skin. Her eyes, scanning the crowd, finding every camera, calculating even now what narrative she could build from this moment. And her hands behind her back, fingers twisted together, white-knuckled, the only part of her that betrayed what she truly felt. The news anchor's voice cut through. We can now confirm. FBI agents have arrested Evelyn Bishop Cross, CEO of Bishop and Associates Architecture, at her own company's reopening ceremony. Details on charges are still emerging, but sources indicate federal counts including fraud, embezzlement, and multiple counts of homicide. Multiple counts of homicide. The words hung in the air of my hotel room. 3 million people just heard that my daughter was arrested for murder. At her own party. In her own building. Wearing white. I thought about the irony and felt nothing. The coverage split screen. On the left, Evelyn being guided into a black SUV. Her white gown bright against the dark vehicle like a ghost being swallowed. On the right, a second arrest. Winnetka, Illinois. Raymond Cross, 45, led from his home in handcuffs 30 minutes after his wife. He was in sweatpants. He had been watching the ceremony on television when the agents knocked. He had seen his wife arrested and still did not run. Some people are not built for running. Raymond was built for following. And now he would follow Evelyn into federal custody. The news anchor continued. Charges include wire fraud, embezzlement of over $70 million, 14 counts of negligent homicide in connection with construction site deaths, and 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Helen Bishop and Daniel Bishop this past October. 14 counts of negligent homicide, 2 counts of first-degree murder. The newsroom showed photographs now. Helen's face from a company headshot, Daniel's from his LinkedIn profile. My wife and son, displayed on national television as murder victims while their killer was driven through Chicago streets in handcuffs. I held my father's pocket watch. The brass was warm from my grip, the crystal face pressing against my palm. I had held this watch at their funeral. I had held it in the lawyer's office. I had held it in the cabin, on the lake, in the bakery, and now I held it watching the end of everything my daughter had built on the foundation of their deaths. Have you ever waited years for justice and then felt nothing when it arrived? That is what November 23rd felt like. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just the hollow sound of a building finally collapsing after the supports were removed long ago. The structure was already dead. The collapse was just physics catching up to truth. My phone rang. Miranda. It is done, both in custody. Reeves confirms no complications. She paused. The network is already requesting comment from the family. I told them no statement at this time. Thank you, Miranda. How do you feel? I looked at the television. The live feed showed Bishop Tower from street level now. Cleaning crews were already on ladders near the entrance, taking down the gold letters. B-I-S-H-O-P. One by one, my family name was being removed from the building my daughter used as a monument to herself. I feel like it is raining, I said. And the building is finally coming down. Miranda was quiet for a moment. Get some rest, Walter. The trial will be long. You will need your strength. I turned off the television. The room went quiet. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its indifferent millions. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, holding a pocket watch, and a phone, and nothing else. My daughter was in handcuffs. My family name was being scraped from gold. And somewhere in a Swiss bank, $85 million waited to become something better than what it had protected me from. Helen. Daniel. We did it. But the words felt hollow, because they were not here to hear them. The trial began on February 3rd in the federal courthouse on South Dearborn Street in Chicago. 3 weeks, 15 days of testimony, 47 witnesses, 912 pieces of evidence, and one moment that stopped time. I took the stand on day 4. The witness box felt like a confessional, elevated and exposed, with 12 strangers watching my every breath. I wore a suit Miranda had chosen. Dark gray. Conservative. The suit of a man who builds things, not destroys them. Evelyn sat 15 feet away at the defense table in navy blue. her hair pulled back, her expression constructed from practiced neutrality. She did not look at me. Not once in 3 weeks did my daughter meet my eyes. The prosecutor walked me through the evidence methodically. The financial records, the shell companies, the wire transfers spanning 7 years. Then she asked about the blueprints. Mr. Bishop, can you explain to the jury what Project 14 is? I looked at the 12 faces. Accountants, teachers, a retired Marine, a grocery store manager, people who had never read a blueprint in their lives. And I had to make them understand how a father and son hid murder confessions inside architectural drawings. When my son Daniel was 12 years old, I said, I taught him a game. We called it Hidden Dimensions. You embed messages inside technical drawings by manipulating the spacing of grid lines. I spent 40 minutes explaining our cipher to that jury, showing them enlarged sections of Daniel's blueprints on a screen, demonstrating how millimeter variations in grid spacing translated to letters, words, sentences. I showed them each decoded message, each victim's name, each date, each method of death, and then I showed them the 14th blueprint, Meridian Tower, Daniel's final drawing, the message he encoded 3 weeks before the scaffold killed him. This building will kill me. I know it. The connectors will fail under full crew weight. Tell Dad. Tell him I am sorry I did not call back. The retired Marine in seat 9 wiped his eyes. The grocery store manager in seat 3 covered her mouth with her hand. And Evelyn sat motionless at the defense table, watching her brother's last words displayed on a screen 10 feet tall, showing nothing. Day 7 brought the families. 14 of them. One by one, they took the stand and told the jury about the people they lost. Maria Torres, whose husband Carlos fell from scaffolding at the Riverside complex. She brought their daughter, now 11, who did not remember her father's face. Thomas Wright's mother, 83 years old, who trembled so badly the bailiff brought her water. She said Thomas called her every Sunday, and the phone had been silent for 4 years. 14 families. 14 empty chairs at dinner tables. 14 birthdays that no longer meant celebration. The jury heard each one, and with each testimony, I watched the foreman's expression harden from attention to fury. Day 12. The defense rested without calling Evelyn to the stand. Her attorneys knew better than to let her speak, but the prosecution had one final witness, one that no one expected. Raymond Cross took the stand in an orange jumpsuit, 20 pounds lighter than the man I remembered from the funeral. His eyes were hollow, his hands trembled. 3 weeks in federal custody had stripped away everything soft about him, leaving only bones and fear and the desperate need to save himself. The prosecutor's first question was simple. Mr. Cross, why have you agreed to testify against your wife? Raymond's voice cracked. Because she tried to kill me. The courtroom stirred. The judge leaned forward. 3 weeks ago, Raymond continued, my food in the detention facility contained industrial bleach, enough to cause internal chemical burns. I spent 4 days in the medical unit. His eyes found Evelyn for the first time. She arranged it through another inmate, because I knew too much, and she could not control me anymore. Evelyn's mask flickered, a micro-expression, gone in a heartbeat, but I saw it. Raymond told the jury everything, how Evelyn researched scaffold failures for months before ordering the substitution at Meridian Tower, how she administered thallium to Helen over 6 weeks through her evening tea, weakening her before the final act, how the scaffold collapse was timed to coincide with Helen and Daniel's site visit, how Evelyn watched the news coverage from her office and opened a bottle of champagne when the hospital confirmed both deaths. She opened champagne, Raymond said. His voice was barely a whisper. While your mother was being pronounced dead, your wife was drinking champagne in her corner office with the door closed. The jury foreman's hands were white on the railing. Evelyn could not hold it. 3 weeks of perfect composure shattered in a single moment. She rose from her chair, her face contorted, and screamed, "He is lying. He is lying. I never touched that tea. I never ordered anything. He did it. He did it all. And now he is trying to save himself by destroying me. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Miss Bishop Cross. Sit down. But Evelyn was beyond hearing. Her attorneys grabbed her arms and she fought them, twisting, screaming, her composure finally gone. Not human anymore. Something feral that had worn a mask for 40 years and finally torn it off in front of 12 strangers who would decide her fate. The judge declared a recess. Guards moved in. And the jury sat in stunned silence, watching the CEO, the devoted daughter, the grieving sister, transform into exactly what she was, a monster who had been caught. Deliberation took 4 days, 96 hours of 12 people, examining 912 pieces of evidence, 14 decoded blueprints, and 47 witness testimonies. I sat in the courthouse hallway each day from dawn until the bailiff sent me home. Miranda brought coffee. I could not eat. On the 4th evening, at 6:31, the bailiff appeared. The jury has reached a verdict. I walked into that courtroom on legs that did not feel like mine. Sat in the gallery row I had occupied for 3 weeks. Gripped my father's pocket watch until the brass bit into my palm. The foreman stood. Guilty on all counts of embezzlement and wire fraud. Guilty on 14 counts of negligent homicide. He paused. The courtroom held its breath. Guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. 14 families rose as one. Not planned. Not coordinated. A spontaneous wave of people standing, because sitting was no longer possible. Silence first. Complete silence. Then Maria Torres, in the 3rd row, Carlos's widow, began to cry. A sound that was not grief. A sound that was the end of waiting. Then they all cried. And I cried with them. Evelyn stood motionless at the defense table. The judge spoke. 50 years federal imprisonment. No possibility of parole for 30 years. The words landed on my daughter like dirt on a casket. And she showed nothing. Not rage. Not tears. Just the blank expression of a building with no one left inside. They led her away in handcuffs. The metal clicked against her wrists. And as she passed through the courtroom doors, she turned her head. Not toward me. Toward the families. Toward the 14 widows and orphans and grieving mothers who had just watched justice arrive 4 years too late. And she smiled. That same small curve I saw at Helen's funeral. Some monsters cannot be contained by verdicts. They can only be caged. Prison did not contain my daughter. It just gave her a smaller kingdom to rule. 3 weeks after sentencing, Miranda called at 6 in the morning. Her voice held a tension I had not heard since the night before the arrest. Walter, there has been a threat. She paused. Against the Kowalskis. I sat up in bed. The Manhattan hotel room was gray with early light. My chest tightened around the breath I had just taken. A voicemail was left at my office last night, Miranda continued. Disguised voice. Mechanical. But the message was specific. The Kowalski family in Michigan. Their grandson, Tommy Jr., 8 years old, walks to school alone on Maple Street at 7:45 every morning. The words hit me like ice water. Tommy Jr., 8 years old. A child I had never met, belonging to people who saved my life, with bread and truck keys, and the simple faith that strangers deserve kindness. And my daughter, from behind federal prison walls, had reached out and wrapped her fingers around that child's throat. How? I managed. Evelyn has been building a network since the day she was processed. Miranda's voice was controlled, but I could hear the edge beneath. She has currency in there. Information, connections from her business life. People on the outside who owe her favors. The call was traced to FCI Pekin. An inmate named Diane Harwell made it on Evelyn's behalf. I was already reaching for my phone with the other hand. Get me Reeves. Thomas Reeves answered on the second ring. He had already been briefed. Agents were dispatched 40 minutes ago, he said. The Kowalski family will be in protective custody within the hour. Within the hour. Stan and Agnes, who asked nothing of me except that I come back and tell them I was all right, were about to have federal agents knock on their bakery door at dawn. Because they helped a stranger. Because they gave me bread and their son's truck and $300. Because my daughter punishes kindness the way other people punish betrayal. I paid for everything. New identities. New location. A bakery in a city Evelyn would never connect to them. $200,000 from the Ashworth Trust, spent without hesitation, because some debts cannot be measured in money. Stan Kowalski saved my life. The least I could do was save his grandsons. Miranda handled the legal paperwork. Within 72 hours, the Kowalski family ceased to exist in Michigan. New names, new city, new life, all because they once opened their door to a frozen stranger and did not ask why. Do you know what it costs to be kind to the wrong person's enemy? It costs everything. Your name, your home, your bakery that has been open since 1987. It costs the life you built because someone else decided your compassion was a weapon to be used against the person you helped. Stan and Agnes paid that price because of me. I swore I would spend the rest of my life making sure it was worth it. 2 weeks later, Evelyn made her move. The report came from Reeves. At 2:15 in the morning, Evelyn Bishop Cross was found unconscious in her cell. Self-inflicted lacerations on both forearms. Guards rushed her to the prison medical unit. Standard protocol for attempted self-harm. Restraints removed for treatment. Medical staff reduced to 1 nurse. At 2:43, Evelyn attacked the nurse with a concealed blade fashioned from a cafeteria tray. She took the nurse's badge, changed into medical scrubs, and made it through 2 security checkpoints before a corrections officer recognized her face from the news coverage that had played on every television in America 3 months earlier. She made it 50 yards from the exterior fence. 50 yards from freedom. From disappearing into the Illinois night with nothing but rage and the connections she had built from inside a cell. 50 yards. And then she was on the ground with 4 guards on top of her, screaming words that the incident report described as incoherent threats against multiple individuals. Reeves called me the morning after. His voice was carefully neutral. She is in maximum security now. Solitary confinement. 23 hours a day in a concrete box. No phone access. No visitors except legal counsel. No network. No contacts. He paused. Additional charges filed. Assault on correctional staff. Attempted escape. Possession of a weapon. Her sentence will be revised upward. How much upward? Likely life without parole. Given the escape attempt, the weapon, and the ongoing threats against witnesses, no parole board will ever release her. Life without parole. My daughter would die in that concrete box. No release date. No hope. No future beyond gray walls and fluorescent lights and the slow erosion of time. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the weight of it. The finality. The understanding that the girl who once asked me to build her a treehouse would spend every remaining day of her life in a space smaller than the walk-in closet she had at home. Then, 1 week after the escape attempt, Miranda forwarded a letter from Evelyn's legal counsel, a formal request for visitation. My daughter wanted to see me. She claimed to have information about Helen, something I did not know, something she would only share in person. Miranda advised against it. It is manipulation, she said. She has nothing. She wants to see if she can still control you, wants to prove to herself that even from solitary, she can make you come when she calls. Miranda was probably right. Evelyn probably had nothing. The claim about Helen was likely bait, designed to exploit the one weakness my daughter knew I had. My love for my wife. My need to know everything Helen thought, felt, planned. But there was another possibility. Small and sharp like a splinter. What if Evelyn did know something? What if Helen, in those final months, had confronted her daughter one last time? What if words were exchanged that Helen never wrote down? What if my wife said something to Evelyn before she died that I needed to hear? I could not know without going, and not knowing would haunt me more than anything Evelyn could say to my face. I called Miranda back. Book the visitation. I am going. Walter. She exhaled. This is exactly what she wants. I know. But I need to look her in the eyes. Not for her, for me. I need to hear from her own mouth why she destroyed us. And then I need to walk away and never go back. Silence on the line. Then Miranda's voice, softer than I had ever heard it. I will arrange it. FCI Pekin. Maximum security visitation. Bulletproof glass. Monitored phones. Armed guards at every door. She paused. And Walter. Whatever she says to you in there, remember, she has already lost. Everything she says is the language of the defeated. I flew to Illinois 3 days later. Not because I believed Evelyn had secrets about Helen, but because I needed to hear, from her own mouth, why she became what she became, why she looked at a family that loved her and saw only obstacles to be removed. I needed to understand, and then I needed to let go. FCI Pekin. Maximum security wing. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and recycled air. Armed guards at every door. Cameras in every corner. My footsteps echoed off cinder block walls painted the color of nothing. I carried one thing, a sealed envelope in my jacket pocket. 8 words written that morning. The visitation room was divided by bulletproof glass. 2 phones mounted on either side. A steel chair bolted to the floor. No warmth. No comfort. Just glass and concrete and the mechanical observation of people who had lost the right to be trusted. I sat. The glass reflected my face. 63 years old. Thinner than at the funeral. But my eyes were clear. Evelyn would look into them and see something she did not expect. Not the broken old man she tried to create. A door opened on her side. 2 guards escorted a figure in orange. Thinner, paler, hair limp. 3 months in solitary had taken something even she could not perform her way out of. But her eyes were the same. Cold and calculating and patient. She picked up the phone. "Hello, Daddy. Thank you for coming." I said nothing. Waited. I told them I have information about Mom. Something she said to me that you do not know. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke. There was no phone call, Evelyn. I checked the records. October 15th. Nothing. Something shifted behind her eyes. A recalculation. You checked. Of course I checked. She laughed, low and hollow. Fine. There was no call. I made it up. I wanted to see if you would come. She met my eyes. You did. Even now, Daddy, I can still make you show up. I let her believe she had won this small victory. Then, I asked the question I flew 1,000 miles to ask. Why? All of it. The money. The workers. Your mother. Your brother. Evelyn studied me through the glass, the way a scientist studies a specimen. You really do not understand. You and Mom built that company and thought it was a family. It was never a family. It was a resource. Resources exist to be used. Helen was your mother. Helen was in my way. She said it the way someone describes moving furniture. She found the money. She was going to expose me. So I removed the problem. And Daniel? Daniel chose his side. He had the evidence. He could have kept quiet. But he chose you over himself. Stupid. Sentimental. Like you. The 14 workers? Acceptable losses. 2 per year. In an industry with the highest fatality rate in the country. No one would have noticed if Daniel had not gone looking. I stared at my daughter. This woman I held as an infant, whose first word was Dada, who now discussed 14 murders with the emotional engagement of someone reviewing a spreadsheet. Do you feel anything? Any remorse? Evelyn leaned forward. Her breath fogged the glass. I regret getting caught. That is all. She smiled. A real smile. If Daniel had kept his mouth shut, if Mom had minded her own business, we would all still be having Thanksgiving dinner together. They made their choices. I made mine. I looked at my daughter and understood, finally and completely, that she had never loved any of us. We were structural elements, load-bearing walls she could lean on until she no longer needed support. Then she demolished us without sentiment, the way you demolish a building that no longer serves its purpose. I stood up. The phone receiver dangled from its cord. That is it? Her voice came through the glass. You came all this way, and now you are just leaving? I pulled the envelope from my jacket, pressed it against the glass so she could read her name, set it on the ledge where guards would deliver it. What is that? I picked up the phone one final time. 8 words. Read them or do not. It does not matter to me anymore. I hung up and turned toward the door. You think forgiveness makes you better than me? She was standing, hands flat against the glass. I am still your daughter. You will never be free of that. I did not turn around. I walked through the door, down the hallway, past the guards, through checkpoints, and out into February sunlight. The air was cold and sharp and clean. Behind me, Evelyn would open that envelope. 8 words in my handwriting. I forgive you. Not for you. For me. She would not understand them. Forgiveness was not in her architecture. Not a load she could calculate, or a resource she could exploit. It would sit in her mind like a foreign object for the rest of her life. And that was enough. Not revenge. Not justice. Those were already delivered. This was me putting down a weight I had carried since the funeral, setting it on that ledge and walking away lighter. Let me tell you about forgiveness. It is not absolution. It is not forgetting. It is not saying what happened was acceptable. Forgiveness is putting down a weight you have carried so long you forgot what it felt like to stand straight. My daughter murdered my wife and son. I will never forget that. But I will not carry hatred into my grave. Helen would not have wanted it. Daniel would not have wanted it. And neither do I. Miranda's car waited at the curb, engine running. I climbed in and sat, feeling heat thaw. My hands, my face, something deeper. There was still 14 memorials to design, a foundation to build, a cabin on a lake waiting to become home. Somewhere in a new city, a Polish baker and his wife who deserved to know they were safe. My daughter was behind me, locked in glass and concrete, and the architecture of her own choices. Ahead was everything I could still build. I chose ahead. Helen once told me that the greatest buildings are not measured by their height. They are measured by the lives they shelter. I did not understand that when she said it. I was too busy designing skyscrapers. Too busy reaching upward to notice what mattered was always at ground level. I understand it now. Spring came to Lake Michigan the way it comes to all cold places. Slowly, reluctantly, then all at once. The ice retreated from the shoreline in March. By April, the first green appeared along the cabin's foundation. And by May, I was kneeling in dirt outside a building that looked like a ruin and felt like a cathedral, planting the first of 14 rose bushes in soil that still smelled of winter. 14 roses. One for each worker whose name Daniel encoded in his blueprints. One for each family that lost someone to my daughter's greed. I planted them in a line along the cabin's south wall, where they would get full sun. Each bush marked with a small bronze tag bearing a name and a date. James Kowalski, April 2013. Maria Santos, September 2014. Thomas Wright, February 2015. All of them. Remembered. Rooted. Growing in the same earth where Helen had built her final architecture. The memorials took me 8 months to design. 14 small structures, each unique, each placed at the construction site where a worker died. Not grand monuments. Not ego projects. Simple shelters. Bus stops. Park benches with canopies. A reading alcove at a public library. Structures that served the communities where these workers lived and died. Buildings that sheltered people instead of killing them. It was the most important work I had ever done. And it was the last architecture I would ever design. The Helen and Daniel Bishop Foundation launched in January 2020. Miranda handled legal structure pro bono. She said it was the least she could do for the woman who had given her the most compelling case of her career. Stan Kowalski joined the board. He had relocated to a city I will not name, running a new bakery under a new name, but his spirit remained exactly the same. He insisted on providing bread for every foundation event. Good bread fixes everything, he told me at the launch party. Your wife knew that. She did. Helen knew everything. By 2021, the foundation had 12 staff members and had helped over 300 families rebuild their lives. Families victimized by financial crimes. Families who lost breadwinners to corporate negligence. Families who had nowhere to turn when the people who should have protected them became the ones who destroyed them. Do you want to know what redemption looks like? It looks like Maria Torres, widow of construction worker number 7, now working as our family liaison coordinator. It looks like Thomas Wright's mother, 83 years old, finally able to visit her son's memorial without collapsing because she knows his death meant something. It looks like 300 families who might have lost everything, now standing because Helen and Daniel's sacrifice gave them somewhere to fall. Every family we helped was a defeat for Evelyn. Every life rebuilt was proof that love builds more than hate destroys. The Bishop name now meant something different. Not towers and glass and corporate ambition. Shelter. Safety. The quiet architecture of caring for people who have been broken. I moved into the cabin permanently that summer. The building Helen designed as my fortress became my home. I added a drafting table by the window facing the lake. I hung Daniel's framed treehouse blueprint on the wall beside it. The one from his childhood bedroom in Lincoln Park. The one I almost took and then left behind. Miranda had it retrieved for me after the trial. It hangs there now, the first blueprint my son ever drew, watching over the last work his father will ever do. In October, a letter arrived, forwarded through Miranda's office, from an APO address. Military mail. I opened it with hands that knew before my mind did who it was from. Mr. Bishop. My name is Tommy Kowalski. I am a sergeant in the United States Army currently stationed overseas. My parents told me what happened, what you did for them, what they did for you. I want you to know something. When I was 17, I was in serious trouble. The kind that ends lives or puts you in prison. Strangers helped me survive. People who owed me nothing gave me everything. My parents taught me that this is how the world works. You keep each other alive. They told me you understood this. I think you do. Thank you for proving that good people still exist. Thank you for protecting my family. When my deployment ends, I would like to meet you, if that is all right. I read Tommy's letter 3 times. Then I set it on the drafting table beside Daniel's blueprint and looked out the window at Lake Michigan. The water was gold in the evening light. The rose bushes along the south wall had bloomed all summer and were now settling into autumn dormancy. 14 roses, sleeping but alive, waiting for spring. Helen left me 3 sentences in a letter James delivered after everything was over. 3 sentences that guide everything I do. Walter, you are the strongest man I have ever known, even if you never believed it yourself. I have never been happier than the 36 years I spent as your wife. Live the rest of your life as if I am still beside you, because I am. I whispered those words into the October evening and felt her presence the way you feel a building around you. Not visible, not tangible, but holding you up, keeping the weather out, making space for life to happen inside its walls. The cabin stands on the shore of Lake Michigan. It still looks like a ruin from outside. Paint peeling, roof sagging, windows clouded with grime. But inside, it is the most beautiful thing I have ever known. Helen's final architecture. A home built from evidence and love, and the stubborn refusal to let monsters win. I am Walter Bishop. I am 65 years old. I am scarred, but whole. And my story is not over. It is just beginning again. Looking back, this journey changed the man I once was. I believed family loyalty was unconditional. I believed the people you raise will always carry something of your love inside them. I was wrong about Evelyn, but I was right about Helen, right about Daniel, right about the strangers who become family when blood fails you. If you learn anything from my story, let it be this. Love the people in your life fiercely. Protect them without hesitation. But never close your eyes to what someone is becoming, even if that someone shares your name. My wife saw the truth and built an ark. My son saw the truth and stood his ground. Their courage saved me. Their love outlasted their lives. I believe God allowed me to survive so that something meaningful could grow from the ashes. 14 memorials, 300 families, a foundation that turns tragedy into shelter, and one cabin on a lake where a dead woman's love still lives in every beam and nail and perfectly hidden safe beneath the floor. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts below. What would you have done in my position? Would you have forgiven the person who destroyed your family? I would truly value hearing your perspective. And if these stories mean something to you, consider subscribing so you do not miss what comes next. There are always more stories to tell, more buildings to construct from the wreckage, more proof that love, stubborn and patient and architectural in its precision, always outlasts the monsters. Always.